Magandang hapon mga kababayan. Ako po si Daphne Osenia Paez and welcome to 2024 Post-SONA discussions. We hope everyone is safe and well in their homes. It has been raining relentlessly due to Typhoon Karina and Habagat, but rest assured that all government agencies involved in response and rescue, led by the President, are closely monitoring the situation nationwide. And this is why some of our panelists today will be joining us via Zoom. This session will focus on infrastructure development and energy security. President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. enumerated in his State of the Nation address completed and ongoing infrastructure projects of the government. Infrastructure that involved physical and digital connectivity, and more importantly, energy. Our panelists for this session, Department of Energy Secretary Rafael Lotilla, Department of Information and Communications Technology Secretary Ivan John Uy, Department of Transportation, we have Undersecretary Timothy John Batan. From the Department of Public Works and Highways, Undersecretary Maria Catalina Cabral via Zoom.
Thank you, Daphne. Magandang hapon po. Maulang hapon sa ating lahat.
Energy Regulatory Commission Chair.
At kung kaya't noong March 2024, ating napirmahan ng concession agreement sa ating concessionaire, ang New NAIA International Airport, ang New NAIA Airport Corporation or NNIC, at tayo ay mag-handover ng airport sa September 14. So, isa't kalahating buwan na lang at ating maiya-handover na ang ating NAIA. Ngayon, anong inaasahan natin? Una sa lahat, itataas natin ang kapasidad ng airport mula 35 hanggang 62 million passengers per annum at ang kapasidad ng ating runway na magserbisyo ng aircrafts from 40 to 48 movements per hour. Ngayon, paano yan gagawin? In the first 6 years of the concession, we are expecting our concessionaire to put in an estimated 88 billion pesos just in the first 6 years in investments into NAIA. Now, to give context, from 2010 to 2023, ang average capital outlay natin in NAIA has been 2 billion pesos per year. So from 2 billion, we're bringing that up to a total of 88 billion just for the first 6 years. And yan yung inaasahan natin na gagawa nitong additional na kapasidad na mararamdaman ng ating mga pasahero in terms of bigger facilities, more efficient facilities, IT-enabled facilities. Now, aside from that, convenience to passengers, on top of that, meron pa tayong dagdag na revenues na nakuha mula dito sa proyektong ito, a total of 900 billion ang concession payments na matatanggap natin mula sa ating concessionaire. Nandyan yung upfront nilang 30 billion na concession payment, 2 billion per year na annuity payment, and 82% of revenues, excluding passenger service charges, over the 15 plus 10-year concession. So, 1 plus 1 plus 1, nakita natin na ma-expand natin yung capacity, mapaganda natin yung serbisyo, may pasok natin yung karagdagang investment na kinakailangan ng ating pangunahing gateway airport sa Kamaynilaan. Plus, nandyan pa yung meron tayong nakuhang dagdag na kontribusyon sa ating kaban. At syempre, yung service levels at yung mga dagdag na trabaho makikita natin. Yan ang mga outcomes na ating nakita na at inaasahan pang makita dito sa ating NAIA PPP project.
Thank you, Undersecretary Batan. Of course, we look forward to better service and also convenience for all. Very exciting. Let's move on to energy. The President also stated that the energization of the Mindanao-Visayas interconnection is a defining moment not only for the power sector, but for the entire country. Finally, we have connected the power grids of all three major island groups. The unified Philippine grid is a fulfillment of the dream whose seeds were planted in the early 1980s through a vision bolstered by R&D, which we accomplished by applying typical Filipino persistence and dedication. Wow, Secretary Latilia. Now that we have a unified grid, are there plans to develop redundancies in our grid or at least have some contingencies so that we would be prepared should there be problems in the grid?
Thank you, Daphne. Well, that's exactly the vision of the President and which he has again reiterated in the State of the Nation address. So for the first time, we have been able to connect the Visayas and Mindanao, and therefore also with Luzon, and we have one grid. What does this mean for the country? Right now, we have excess capacity or excess power being produced in Mindanao up to 800 megawatts a year. So the excess capacity can now be transported through the submarine cable to the Visayas, to the Visayan Islands, where they are going to be used. So since 2016, this excess power has in effect been stranded. And that's why the President, when he came into office, concentrated on three major projects that would free up stranded power. Nandyan na yung generation power plants, pwede na silang mag-supply ng elektrisidad, ngunit dahil walang transmission connections, hindi sila pwedeng magbato ng elektrisidad where they were needed. So one is the Mindanao-Visayas Interconnection Project, 450 megawatts from Mindanao can go to the Visayas. And then in the Visayas, Cebu, Negros, and Panay are now interconnected. And again, the excess power from Mindanao can now go all the way to Panay, which is at the end of the line. Then in Luzon, would you believe at the start when the President's term began, we had 600 megawatts of power in Bataan, which could not be fully utilized in the metropolitan area because there was not enough transmission lines. So all these three major projects have been completed, and what the President was referring to as Filipino persistence and the formula, what it means really is tutok and pukpok. So in the case of the Department of Energy, we do the tutok, but for the pukpok, we had to depend on the President. And it's the President's office that had to push for this because they involve a lot of elements to be put together. The private sector, there were cases pending in court, there were delays in the construction. So all of these had to come together. Now, we still have much more to do. So one of the things that you mentioned was the redundancy. So, for example, the North Luzon Loop. This is to connect Ilocos with Cagayan. Right now, in those two areas, it's a one-way street, and that's why the power is unstable. We've got to build the loop in the transmission so that in case something happens in the Ilocos side, we can use the Cagayan side, and so on. Same with, as we said, Panay, same with Zamboanga Peninsula. There are many, and Mindoro, for example, that needs to be interconnected with Luzon. So all of these things we're going to work on. And we were able, in the last 2 years, to bring the NGCP's construction from an average or from 2009, when NGCP took over, up to the end of 2022, the transmission lines, the length of the lines increased only by 8%. Now, in the last 2 years, by May of 2024, we have been able to increase that to 10.5%. And that is not enough because in order for new plants to be constructed, there has to be a system impact study that NGCP has to do. And the good news is that when the President started his term, the length of waiting was 2 years for a system impact study. Now it is down to 3 to 6 months, and with NGCP's cooperation, we want to bring it down further so that the needed capacity for generation can be put up in as quickly as possible.
Excellent. Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, persistence and dedication,
Right.
tutok at pukpok.
Pukpok.
A lot can be done. Thank you. We're still on energy here. Ang sinabing ito ng Pangulo ay may kinalaman pa rin sa Department of Energy. And he said, binabalikan at binubusisi natin muli ang EPIRA upang malaman kung natutulungan pa ba nitong mabuti ang ating kasalukuyang sitwasyon or napapanahon na ba na ito ay amyendahan. Hinihiling ko sa Kongreso na pagtulungan na natin ito, alang-alang sa kapakanan ng mga Pilipino. Sa taas ng presyo ng kuryente sa bansa, nahihirapan hindi lamang ang mga negosyante, kundi lalo na ang taong bayan. Secretary Lutilia, other than amendments to the EPIRA law, are there other policy reforms that are necessary to help lower the price of electricity?
Well, thank you again, Daphne. First, the President emphasized the need to introduce some reforms or changes. So one of them actually is extending the life of the corporate life of the power sector and assets liabilities management. At the time that the EPIRA was enacted in 2001, we thought that it would take only 25 years to finish all of the privatization and to raise the funds necessary in order to pay off the debts of the National Power Corporation incurred before. But then, at this time, one of the things that we need to do is actually, in order to prevent an increase in rates and in order to prevent government from having to absorb some 300 billion pesos in 2026, when the life of PISAM ends, we will have to extend the corporate life of PISAM. And there is been agreement in the Congress to go ahead with that. Now, there's a second reason why we need to extend the life of PISAM. For example, in the case of the Agus hydropower plants in Mindanao, we need to have a counterparty to rehabilitate the Agus power plants. Right now, although the installed capacity of Agus is 1,000 megawatts, the dependable capacity is only 600 megawatts. So therefore, there is still a potential of rehabilitating it back to 1,000 megawatts and therefore produce an additional 400 megawatts for Mindanao and also for other parts of the country through the Mindanao-Visayas interconnection. And it also means that the additional capacity, the growth of the need for power and the growth of demand in Mindanao is also growing by at least 6% annually. And it is going to continue to grow as the peace dividend that the President has pointed out in the case of BARM. The Bangsamoro Autonomous Regional, the region is one of the fastest growing regions in Mindanao right now. And that means more power. And through this, by extending the life of PISAM, then we will be able to have a counterparty for the Agus plants. Then we have other assets of PISAM, for example, like the the location of the North Mindanao coal plant, which is going to be closed down, can be made available for newer and cleaner technologies to be put up in the same area. So there are lots of things that we still have to do with that. The other reform, and I hope Chairman Di Malanta will be able to expand more on this, is the strengthening of the Energy Regulatory Commission. Because the Energy Regulatory Commission was created under IPIRA in 2001. But we see that there is now greater need for faster consideration and approval by the ERC of the so many applications we have for renewable energy, even for conventional energy, and they will have to prepare for other eventual new technologies. So these are the things that Congress has supported for consideration in the legislative agenda. Thank you.
Maraming salamat, Secretary Latilla. Let's move on to our next statement. For CCEO Di Malanta, binanggit ng Pangulo sa kanyang SONA na ilan sa mga hakbang na pinatupad ng pamahalaan ay, una, ang mas maayos at patas na lifeline rate program para sa mga mahihirap, lalo na sa mga benepisyaryo ng 4Ps. Pangalawa, ang naging pansamantalang pagsuspende ng fit-all tariff sa ating electric bill. Pangatlo, ang anti-bill shock program. Pang-apat, ang naging pagsuspinde sa wholesale electricity spot market noong panahon ng red alert sa Luzon at Visayas grids. At panglima, mga refund at pagpapatanggal ng mga sobrang singil sa consumer tulad ng franchise fee. CCEO Di Malanta, other than those mentioned by the President, are there other efforts on that part of the ERC that would help lower electricity cost in the country?
Thank you, Daphne, and thank you, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity for ERC to update you and support also the call of the President for promoting energy affordability. Yung mga nabanggit po ni Pangulo, patuloy naman po natin yun minamatyagan. Katulad nung sa fit-all suspension ng fit-all rate sa ating mga bills. Patuloy po na binabantayan natin, pag healthy yung fit-all fund, ito po yung binabayad natin for renewable energy generation na sinusupply sa ating lahat. Pag po healthy yung fund, titingnan natin kung may pagkakataon ulit na isuspinde, kahit po ilang sentimo lang ito, ngayon ay 4 centavos ito per kilowatt hour, kabawasan din po ito sa binabayad natin sa kuryente. Pero bukod po dito, binabantayan din natin yung nabanggit din kanina ni Secretary Lotilla, yung impact ng transmission project delays. Kasi po may impact po ito sa taas din ng kuryente. So nasimula na rin naman po ang komisyon sa pagbabantay nito para po tataasan natin yung level of accountability for our regulated entities. For the refunds, katulad po na nabanggit ng Pangulo, meron pa po tayong inaabangan na 20 billion pesos na refund for some of our electric cooperatives na hindi pa nila nakukumpleto. So meron po tayong mga consumers na nasa mga electric cooperatives na patuloy mag-enjoy ng kaunting refund sa kanilang mga electric cooperatives. Yun pong sa private utility natin, katulad ng Meralco, na kumpleto na po niya yung refund na inaasahan natin sa kanya. Patuloy din po yung ating fuel cost audit na tinatawag. Ito po yung pinapasa na pass-through charges ng mga generation companies na gumagamit ng panggatong katulad ng coal, diesel, and gas. Pag po ang distribution utility or electric cooperative, hindi po niya na-verify itong mga panggastos na ito, hindi po niya dapat pinapasa sa consumers. Meron na po tayong at least 2 electric cooperatives na nakita na hindi nagve-verify ng kanilang mga pinapasa sa consumers, pinatawan na po natin yan ng penalty at naglabas po tayo ng warning na pag pinagpatuloy nila ang gawaing ito, hindi na sila makakasingil ng pass-through charges at all sa kanilang mga consumers. So inaabangan po natin na sana ay pag-igting natin yung disiplina sa ating mga distribution utilities, pati na rin po sa lahat ng regulated entities natin.
Thank you, Chairperson De Malanta. Now, the President also expressed, together with our private sector partners, we will efficiently harness the concept of common towers to provide connectivity to Filipinos who are at the far end of the last mile. Expect full government support to ensure the successful completion of this critical project, including policy reforms and streamlined processes. Now, what other initiatives can the government undertake to ensure that all areas would have internet connectivity? Secretary Uy.
Thank you, Daphne. Well, we do have very unique challenges with respect to connectivity, especially because we are an archipelagic country. So with more than 7,600 islands, we are deploying the correct technology with respect to areas where those technologies are actually appropriate. So fiber optic cables in most of the landlocked areas where we are able to lay down those cables either through underground cables or terrestrial cables through these common tower that we are using. However, in the remote islands and in the mountainous regions where even the towers will not be feasible, we have to utilize other technologies. And the timing of the satellite, low Earth orbit satellites is actually that's very good because it has now brought down the cost of internet connectivity using satellite connectivity. And so we've been deploying a large number of that all throughout the different islands without having to spend a huge amount laying down submarine cables to connect those islands. So in most cases, it's not economically feasible to lay down those cables because the communities are too small or they do not have the ability to economically generate enough economic activity to pay for the cables. So we've deployed LEO satellites. The most famous, as you know, is the Starlink system. And so far, the Philippines is one of the fastest growing sites for that. In our recent meeting with them, they mentioned that they have at least already deployed 30,000 terminals in the country in less than 1 year. So it's one of the fastest growing satellite countries that are utilizing this kind of technology. So we are exploring more of these technology in order to quickly deploy connectivity in areas that are hard to reach, especially by traditional cable connections.
Thank you. Still on internet connectivity, another quote from the President's State of the Nation address. As part of our nationwide internet infrastructure development, phase 1 of the national fiber backbone has been completed and operationalized. Phases 2 and 3 have already begun early this year and shall be completed by 2026. This fiber backbone will give us sufficient capacity in terms of bandwidth. Secretary Uy, what projects will the DICT implement to ensure internet connectivity in the areas that would not be reached by the national fiber backbone?
Well, the national fiber backbone is a 2 terabit capacity backbone that connects directly to the United States. So currently, because phase 1 has been activated, we currently have opened up about 600 gigabits of bandwidth that's going to be used by the 17 provinces that are connected on the phase 1. So with phase 2 and phase 3 coming up, we are already working on linking up with domestic submarine cable providers, as well as setting up middle mile and last mile connectivity in order to fully utilize the bandwidth that will be traveling through that backbone. In the meantime, in order to further speed up our deployment, the President recently has approved the loan from the World Bank of about $280 million loan in order to accelerate the remaining phases of the national backbone, especially in the Mindanao area. So with that loan, we will be able to accelerate now the deployment without having to wait for the annual General Appropriations Act, which will come out, year by year. Because if we wait for that, it will take a long time before we reach Mindanao. So we took out the loan now to finance Mindanao, and then everything will now meet in the middle. So while we are working from Luzon to Visayas down, the one from Mindanao will also be, through that finance loan, be connected, and it will work its way up. Then we will have a very redundant system, because now the fiber optic submarine cables that are connecting via Mindanao will now also be available to supply Mindanao, Visayas, and Luzon, rather than relying purely on the submarine cables that have been landing in Luzon in the past. So this will provide us with very good redundancy. So from 14 submarine cables, we will be increasing it to 16 submarine cables in a very short period of time. I mean, comparing it to, let's say, Vietnam, that only has 3 submarine cables. So that assures all our investors who want to locate in the Philippines that we have so much capacity and redundancy in terms of internet connection.
Thank you for that update. Wow. And we have another quote for DICT. Bigger and faster IT infrastructure requires stronger and more impervious cyber defense. Our recently launched National Cybersecurity Plan lays down the blueprint for us to safeguard our systems against cyber attacks. Secretary Uy, have we been able to crack down on these cyber criminals, and have there been any arrests or cases filed against them? What about those committed abroad? Are there going to be efforts to partner with other governments to run after these criminals?
Well, locally, we have been able to help our law enforcers in going after the local cyber criminals, cyber scammers, and hackers. I'm sure you've read in the newspapers and seen on TV, our law enforcement agencies parading some of these cyber criminals that have been hacking or scamming Filipinos for the past several years. So these are a joint effort between DICT and the law enforcement agencies in providing the technical intelligence so that our law enforcers will be able to obtain the appropriate warrants to raid the places, as well as to arrest the perpetrators. In many instances, a lot of these scamming syndicates are operating behind legitimate POGO operations. And so it's definitely a welcome announcement that when the President announced in his SONA of finally banning POGO, it will now make our lives easier, because we have been tracking a lot of these scammers who are operating behind these operators. And so by finally cutting, in short, their umbilical cord, there will be lesser opportunities for them to utilize those same bandwidth, those same technology in scamming and in defrauding our people. On top of that, I just came back from Washington, D.C. Last week for the first Philippine-U.S. Cyber Digital Dialogue. So this was an inaugural dialogue where we're working this with the United States, cooperating with each other in order to build our cyber defenses, but at the same time, work on ways and means of tracking down international cyber criminal syndicates. We brought a large delegation with them, and we met with our counterparts there, including their law enforcement agencies, their national security agencies, in order to build up better capacity and better collaboration between the agencies concerned on cybersecurity, cyber defense, and law enforcement, so that we will be able to build better responses and prevent attacks that actually have been growing worldwide. This phenomena is not just in the Philippines. It's actually a growing phenomena worldwide because of it's a very lucrative trade. Cybercrime is very lucrative, and it's actually bigger now than the drug trade. So that actually is a huge incentive for cyber criminals to go into this kind of nefarious activity. And so it now requires a global response, and that's what we're doing. Aside from the U.S.-Philippine cyber dialogue and cooperation, we're working with many other countries and international organizations, the Interpol, the cybersecurity agencies of all the different countries, who are all working together to go after many of these cyber criminal syndicates.
Yeah, wow. Because of course, cybersecurity does not just involve financial scamming, it's also the security of our children. And sometimes human trafficking is also involved, but that's for a different sector. Let's go back to our energy and security issues. Let's open the floor now to some questions. We have some questions here from the media. Let me call on Luisa Erispe from PTV4.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Luisa Erispe from PTV4. This question po is for Secretary Lotilla. In the President's SONA, he mentioned that more energy projects and new investments are in the pipeline to cope with the country's growing energy demand at the height of the increased energy consumption especially during the El Nino phenomenon. Conventional or traditional power plants such as coal and gas-fired plants proved to be more dependable. What is the status of power generation projects right now that the country is facing commitments to its carbon neutrality goals?
Well, thank you, Julia, for the question. The committed power plants that we have are on stream, and therefore, for Luzon, for example, we have still a capacity of I'm talking about the natural gas. The new LNG terminals can support up to 8,000 megawatts of power plants powered by natural gas. And in our case, of course, that is complemented as well by the natural gas coming from Malampaya, which is indigenous. But the other committed power plants also include coal-fired power plants. And we have for this year, for example, we have around 4,000 megawatts of new capacity that has been committed, and almost 2,000 of that is base load capacity, consisting of coal as well as some geothermal. Now, to the extent that a number of these coal-fired power plants have been delayed, one by the pandemic in the past, and some subsequent delays after that, we will still be seeing some of these coal-fired power plants being put up as late as 2028. So to that extent, it is going to affect our renewable energy targets. But it doesn't mean that we're going to give up on those targets. Instead, we view this as a non-linear growth for renewable energy. Right now, the renewable energy sources as a whole contribute up to 22% of the country's electricity. But of the total power, the one source from solar and wind constitute only around 3%. So we have a long way to go insofar as variable renewable energy is concerned, and therefore we will continue to push with that, including, of course, offshore wind energy. And here we are working together with everyone in order to achieve these. So, for instance, in the case of offshore wind, we're working with the Department of Transportation, because the Philippine Ports Authority would need to be able to come up with the support ports for that. And an important point that all of us here, for example, including DPWH, are concerned with is really connectivity. Secretary Uy has pointed out the submarine cables that are needed for information communication technology, the bridges and the roads that DPWH is building, the mass transport systems that are being built by the Department of Transport. So the President at the cabinet meetings has emphasized the need to come together and, for example, address issues like right of way as a common issue for all of these departments, because connectivity, whether it is virtual connectivity, it is electricity and so on, they all need to come together. In case of an emergency, we in the power sector are dependent on the communication sector in order to be able to find out where the damaged infrastructure are and to deploy additional assistance. Now, in their case, they cannot also operate without power. So there is so much that intersectoral cooperation that is needed. When we talk, for example, of agriculture, so now the National Irrigation Administration is promoting solar-powered irrigation sources. And we still have to use renewable energy even for our equipment, harvesting, post-harvest, and so on. So there's so much in the renewable energy space, not even directly for power uses, that we can still deploy. Thank you.
You have another question?
Yes po. Another question lang po for Secretary Latilla still. Sir, I know we're considering the renewable energy for an alternative source of electricity in the country. But since the President is very much concerned on the cost of electricity in the country, do you think the cost of electricity will be affected if ever unifying the grid between Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao? Will it lower the cost of electricity in the country?
I will defer to Chairman Di Malanta to expound on how it will help bring down the rates for power. But I would like to stress that, for instance, in off-grid areas, which are right now 100% dependent on diesel fuel, if we introduce renewable energy sources from solar and from wind, then we are going to really reduce their fuel costs. And that will have a direct impact on the cost of power. So, Chair Di Malanta has more to say about these things as they impact the rates, for sure.
Okay, Chair De Malanta.
Thank you, Daphne. Thank you also for the question. Thanks, Secretary Notilia. But definitely, it will impact the connection of Mindanao to Visayas and Visayas to Luzon. Definitely will have an impact on the rate. Secretary Notilia highlighted earlier the ability now of the grid, of the system, to get the excess power or to export the excess power from Mindanao all the way to Visayas, all the way to Panay, is a unique experience that we are now enjoying, because that excess supply, will stabilize that supply situation in Visayas and all the way to Luzon. And additional supply definitely increases competition, and increased competition, as the formula would go, should be lowering electricity costs. If they don't, we are monitoring competition behavior also of our participants, because if there is any anti-competitive behavior that's going on, then it's the ERC's role to penalize anti-competitive behavior. So definitely the connection, because it increases supply, will increase our chances to get to affordable levels of power prices. And definitely increasing renewables will also allow us to access power that doesn't have a fuel component. I mentioned earlier the fuel cost audit that we have been conducting in the agency. And this only concerns, of course, the generation coming from the fossil fuel plants, because they are the ones that use import stability of the grid, knowing that solar and wind, for example, are intermittent resources. We need to balance it with that requirement of voltage and frequency also for the grid. But immediately, those are the direct consequences of increased connectivity and increased renewables in our system.
Thank you, Chair De Malanta, and thank you, Luisa. Oh, one more.
One last follow-up. When is the timeline or target in unifying the grid? And can we expect that with this, we will attract more investors? And are we expecting more baseload supply of electricity? Thank you.
Definitely, we expect more baseload capacity. As I've said, especially in Luzon, we have the committed almost 2,000 megawatts of new baseload capacity, and another 2,000 of variable renewable energy between now and 2028. And with a potential for expansion of the gas-powered power plants of up to 8,000 megawatts. And right now, we are only at 4,400. So that's why it is important that the policies in place and the interconnections are there. As the President has emphasized, and that's why the Energy Regulatory Commission and the Philippine Competition Commission are important in this regard, we've got to have a level playing field so that investors, both foreign and domestic, are going to put their money into new generation and the improvement of distribution of electricity in the Philippines.
Thank you, Secretary Latilia. Let's bring it back to DPWH. Under Secretary Cabral, I have a question for you here. The President has mentioned many times that farm-to-market roads are crucial to ensuring food security. Are you working closely with the Department of Agriculture to build more farm-to-market roads throughout the country?
Yes, Daphne. We are working very closely with the Department of Agriculture for the construction and rehabilitation of farm-to-market roads nationwide. From the budget of the Department of Agriculture, we have built thousands of kilometers of farm-to-market roads, and have also been working not only with the Department of Agriculture itself, but also with the National Irrigation Administration to support not only the farm-to-market roads, but also the irrigation projects of NIA, by collaborating with them and making sure that our flood control projects are multifunctional. Ang ibig sabihin, Daphne, yung aming mga flood control project ay may component na makakatulong not only sa farm to market but sa irrigation aspect ng food security. Kami po ng DA at NIA ay may memorandum of agreement to continue working towards food security. Kasama na rin po namin ang local government units dito at nagtutulungan para po matupad namin ang mga programa ng DA sa kanilang farm-to-market roads at matupad namin ang aming mga flood control projects na kasalukuyan ginagawa namin at sa susunod na taon na may integrated or comprehensive flood management project na. Ang ibig pong sabihin nito ay kami ay magtatayo ng mga sabo dams at reservoir, mga small water impounding at ito ay makakatulong sa National Irrigation Administration para sa kanilang pag-imbak o pag-iipon ng mga tubig na nangangailangan para sa kanilang irrigation areas.
Thank you, Undersecretary Cabral. Question for the DOTR. Senators are urging President Marcos to temporarily suspend the PUV modernization program until all issues surrounding it are resolved. What is the DOTR's stand on this?
On the PUV modernization program, we've heard the President on the deadline that we imposed earlier this year, and that has been followed through and implemented by the department. But it's not just the deadline for consolidation that we should be looking at. It's also the many reforms that our department, together with the LTFRB, have been doing in order to address the concerns of our stakeholders, particularly among our PUV, our jeepney operators and drivers. There was a recent department order that was issued by our secretary on the public transport modernization program, which among others makes it more predictable, makes it simpler to have our local public transport route plans, the LPTRPs, prepared by the local governments and approved eventually by the LTFRB and the DOTR. We have also increased our subsidy to our modernizing jeepney operators and drivers to make sure that the impact of the PUV modernization program is consistent with the principle of just transition, where the government extends a helping hand and assists our drivers and operators in modernizing their respective fleets. Now, what's important to remember about the PUV modernization program is at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is to deliver more convenience, deliver a safer riding experience to our riding public. But at the same time, we're also making the use of our limited roads more efficient. So we always say that this program is not just for our jeepney drivers and operators, whom we're helping transition into a more formal economy, into a more formal, predictable, protected business environment. It's also for our commuters. But third, it's also for our other road users, because a more efficient PUV ecosystem, more efficient set of routes will mean that fewer road space will need to be used by our mass transport, by our road-based mass transport system, making way for everything from our logistics network to our private car users to our industrial users for communications, for energy. So 3 birds with 1 stone, and we're working very closely with all stakeholders concerned in order to make sure that the benefits of the PUV modernization program is delivered to everyone, all stakeholders that are intended to benefit from it.
Thank you. Let's go back to the ERC. Have you resolved issues concerning the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines and generation companies in connection with recent power outages? And also, will there be stricter penalties for power plants who undergo unscheduled or unplanned shutdowns?
Thank you. Yes, the Commission has made significant headways in resolving all these delays on NGCP's part with respect to the 37 delayed power projects that were identified also that were mentioned by the President also in his last year's SONA. I just don't want to preempt the issuance of the decision, but the Commission has already resolved this issue. We should be coming out with our decision in the actual print out of the decision in the next few days. There are penalties that were imposed by the Commission for those projects where there were unjustified delays. Because we have to also understand that in some instances, delays were justified, and those were part of the evaluation of the Commission. On the outages, I think this is for the period 2 weeks in April, we investigated around 139 units that went on outage. Out of those 139 units, we found 37 generation companies that have exceeded their allowable outages based on the resolution of the Commission, and we have issued show cause orders for these exceedances of outages. Once the explanations are submitted to the Commission, once we have completed the evaluation of these explanations, for those that were not justified, we will also be imposing penalties. In previous instances, the Commission had already imposed penalties on generation companies for exceeding their allowable outages. So it will be the same. It will be along the same lines that the Commission will take in this investigation of the recent outages.
Thank you. Still on energy, but with Secretary Lotilia, the President discussed with American companies the possibility of harnessing nuclear energy, which is crucial to the Philippines' energy security. Could you please give us an update on these discussions, particularly on the timeline of any nuclear-related projects in the Philippines?
Thank you, Daphne. As far as the nuclear energy program is concerned, so the proposed law, which establishes the regulatory framework and the independent regulatory authority, this is now being considered at the Senate, and the House has passed its own. The Executive Department, on the other hand, through the National the Nuclear Energy Committee, which is an interagency committee, has come up with the roadmap for nuclear power. And recently, when we released the Philippine Energy Plan, there is indicated there as part of the power mix, nuclear power of around 1,200 megawatts by 2032, and another additional megawatts in subsequent years. But of course, these are fighting targets, because if we do have to consider the availability also of small modular nuclear that may be useful in smaller islands of the country, the commercial availability of such units may not come in before 2030. So all of these are being pursued in cooperation with the private sector, which has been spearheading also the efforts on generation. As of this time, the government is of course not, National Power Corporation is prohibited from entering or establishing nuclear plants on its own, and therefore we really look forward to this as a joint effort with the private sector. But as the President has underlined through the Philippine Development Plan up to 2028, decisions on nuclear power will be science-based, and that they will fully consider all the factors, including safety and the cost and the preparedness of our country to host them.
Thank you, Secretary Lotilia. I'll go back to DOTR. Under the NAIA PPP, we are expecting a total rehabilitation of the airport, including construction of a new terminal, or will it focus on addressing specific problems that perennially hound the premier airport?
Yes, Daphne. The NAIA PPP will address everything from the time that you get on the curbside on the road into NAIA to the time that you leave going home. When I say everything, that's because we have key performance indicators that we prescribe all the way. From the amount of time that you have to wait, the amount of time that you have to wait to enter the parking lot, look for a parking slot, there's a KPI for that. The time that you have to wait from the time that you start lining up at the check-in counters to the time that you finish checking in, there's a KPI for that. The time that you have to wait for immigration counter, security check-in, there's a KPI for that. The availability of our passenger boarding bridges, our aircraft stands, everything until you depart, there's a performance indicator for that. For our arriving passengers, from the time that the plane blocks on, luggage has to reach the conveyor belt within prescribed periods, within prescribed times. After you get your luggage, the time for you to wait for a taxi at the taxi stand, there's a KPI for that. So that's why we say everything is covered, and infrastructure, from infrastructure investments to expand the terminals, build new car parks, build new taxiways, build new aprons, expand our, add the terminal, as you mentioned. But it's all not just infrastructure investments. It's also operational as well as IT improvements. There are artificial intelligence technologies, for example, that will make the passenger experience more seamless. That's part of the package. There are operational improvements that are being implemented and that will be implemented very soon. And again, overall, the end-all of this combination of infrastructure, IT, operational improvements is an improved passenger experience, again, from the time that you arrive at the airport all the way to the time that you depart.
Thank you. Well, it's been a very interesting conversation that we've had here, from, of course, the railway renaissance to the unified power grid nationwide, and of course, the near completion of our national fiber backbone. A lot of developments. We're living in very interesting times. So thank you for updating us, and thank you to the media for asking questions. At this point, I would like to ask all of you to please give your final statements. If there's anything I missed, feel free to do so. Let's begin with the Department of Energy Secretary Rafael Lotilia.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Daphne. I think I'd like to stress the importance of everyone being responsible for our energy supply. It's not the case where government will deliver, because government is no longer in the electricity space. It's supposed to be private sector which will drive the development. But we need everyone's cooperation. So the local government units, and again we will be tested here by the typhoons and extreme weather events. Let's cooperate, for instance, in giving the building permits in a timely way. So the permitting system still needs to be improved upon, and they will help out. The second that I want to emphasize is that we need to take collective care of our infrastructure. So the towers of the transmission and distribution lines, we all have to take care of them. Because the fact is that we have to contend not only with terrorist activities, but also simple thefts. So they're stealing away wires and even parts of towers. And when a typhoon comes, they are so severely weakened that we end up again having to rebuild them. So let's make sure that it is our common responsibility as a country and as a people to make sure that our infrastructure is maintained well. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Lotilla. A round of applause for Secretary Lotilla. Thank you, thank you. Now we move on to Department of Information and Communications Technology, Secretary Ivan John Uy.
Well, Daphne, I'd like to echo the appeal of Secretary Lotilla. When we deploy infrastructure, we deploy solar panels for the satellite connectivity. We also encounter the same problems. The solar panels get stolen. When we deploy, generators in order to run those remote towers, we need to supply fuel regularly. So we deliver 50 liters of fuel, good for 1 month. It ends up with 25 liters of fuel when it reaches the destination dahil tinatawag na lang pinapaihi yung supply when it reaches there. So it increases our costs, but at the same time, it also reduces our resiliency because we're expecting that fuel will last for 1 month. Hindi abot ng 1 month dahil ninakaw na yung fuel. So, and then, kung maputol yung connectivity doon, magrereklamo lahat ng tao doon bakit naputol. At the same time, ganun din with equipment that's getting stolen. So, we'd like to appeal that this infrastructure is deployed, and the government has invested a lot of money, a lot of effort, and it is for everyone's common good. And so it should be our common responsibility to keep an eye on it and to make sure that if we see people who are not very charitable in their actions and start doing those things, report them immediately to the local barangay or to the local tanods or barangay officials so that this thing can be prevented. We live today in a world where connectivity and digitalization is transforming our lives, and we have to ensure that all these resources are continuously available to every segment of our society, and that's what we are doing at the DICT under the direction of the President to reach those that used to be unreachable. And we are putting a lot of resources and efforts in doing so and utilizing all means of digital transport, whether it's fiber optic, terrestrial, submarine, including satellite connectivity, so that we will reach the farthest corners of our country. As the directions of the President is, we do not want to leave anyone behind. So that's my short appeal. Thank you very much, Daphne.
Thank you, Department of Information Communications Technology, Secretary John Ivan Uy. And we move on to the Department of Transportation. We have Undersecretary Timothy John Batan.
Thank you, Daphne. Maybe just to follow through, when we hear PPP, we know it stands for public-private partnership, public being the government. But maybe we can change the third P to public-private people. Because it really will not work if we just depend on public, the government, private, the private sector. Our people also have to contribute in delivering all of these infrastructure assets and services that we need. So just to reinforce the message that our two secretaries are sharing, that this is a shared responsibility, a shared commitment that we need in order to make all of these happen. And maybe just to close, the DOTR has 4 sectors, and I guess we've spoken a lot about our aviation sector with the NAIA PPP project. Maybe just to close there, we like saying that PPP is the first. We're only starting. It's the opening act. We have currently 27 other airports ongoing PPP screening by our partners from the Asian Development Bank, the International Finance Corporation. Davao Airport is the 4th largest airport that we have, and the PPP process of that is already ongoing, for a matter of fact. We've talked about the railway renaissance, but we've only spoken about the Subic-Clark, Manila, Batangas, and the South Long Haul project to Bicol. Maybe just to update everyone, the North-South Commuter Railway, our largest, I think the Philippines' largest infrastructure project in history, is now almost 50% overall progress rate. Our first subway, the Metro Manila Subway project, has a more than 40% overall progress rate. The MRT-7 project is more than 70% completed with the target operations in the first quarter of 2026. LRT-1, Cavite Extension, the first 5 stations will be operational by the end of the year, and a lot of other railway projects coming in. And not just a lot of projects, but a 30-year railway master plan also being developed together with our development partners from JICA, who I saw in the room today, and together with the Asian Development Bank. So not only are we delivering projects in the next few years, but we're also preparing a big pipeline of railway projects for at least 3 decades and 6 administrations to come. But of course, we've also mentioned our road sector, the public transport modernization and the public utility vehicle modernization program is going to be our largest project in terms of people that will benefit from it. Because at the end of the day, our railways, our ports, our airports will not bring people to the last mile. You have to move on to a road-based transport, whether it's a modern jeepney, a bus, a 3-wheel, a 2-wheel mode of transport, and it's our road transport, it's our road-based transportation services that's going to do that. And of course, for our maritime sector, we've completed more than 70 projects in the last 2 years. But the Batangas Passenger Terminal building is now the largest in the country with room for 8,000 passengers at any one time. It looks like an airport. If you haven't been there, the passenger experience for the Batangas port feels like an airport, but that also is just the beginning. We're working on the new Cebu International Container Port in Cebu, and a very innovative project, the Manila Bay, Pasig River, Marikina River, Laguna Lake Ferry System Project, which is being done also as a PPP, but also supported by the Asian Development Bank. Roughly 40 all-electric ferry fleet is what we're trying to put in place for this very innovative project. And altogether, our aviation, our rail, our road, our maritime transportation sectors are intending to really revolutionize and change the way that we travel, point to point, whether for commercial, for leisure, for business, for institutional, industrial purposes. And I guess all of these leads toward what our president has said, what our secretary is delivering on, of realizing a bagong Pilipinas. So, bagong transportasyon para sa isang bagong Pilipinas.
Thank you, Undersecretary Batan. Wow, a round of applause. That's a lot to report on. Thank you. And now from the Department of Public Works and Highways, Undersecretary Maria Catalina Cabral.
The Department of Public Works and Highways. The Department of Public Works and Highways is the construction and engineering arm of government. And we have many game-changing projects and programs in the Department of Public Works and Highways. One of the Line Expressway program that aims to reduce travel time from Ilocos in the north to Bicol in the south, with from 20 hours to just about 9 hours once completed. And part of this program is the 59-kilometer Tarlac-Pangasinan-La Union Expressway extension that will reduce travel time from Rosario in Pangasinan to San Juan, La Union. Actually, we have already awarded the concession agreement to the private sector, and this is already going to start very soon this year. Another project that we are implementing under the Luzon Spine Expressway network is the Arterial Road Bypass Project Phase 3 and the Central Luzon Link Expressway project. So these are two projects that will connect to the eastern part of the country between Tarlac City and Cabanatuan City in Nueva Ecija. We also have the NLEX-SLEX Connector Road project that will bypass EDSA, and this 7-kilometer elevated expressway is already partially operational. Moving to other projects under our LSAEN program is the C5 South Luzon Link Expressway project. We also have the Cavite-Laguna Expressway project in the south that aims to reduce travel time from Cavitex in Kawit to the South Luzon Expressway from 2 hours to just about 35 minutes. And we are extending South Luzon Expressway all the way from Santo Tomas, Batangas right now, all the way to Quezon, reducing travel time from 4 hours to just about 1 hour. We are also improving and upgrading the country's primary road, and that is Maharlika Highway or Daang Maharlika. This more than 3,000 kilometers of primary national road is also important and plays a vital role in disaster response, especially during calamities like this, because this is our primary means of transportation to deliver emergency response supplies and resources during natural disasters. Apart from this, we have this very important Metro Manila Logistic Improvement Program that will involve the construction and improvement of many bridges across Pasig River, Mangahan River, Marikina River, and Mangahan Floodway. Among this program are bridges across Del Pan in Manila that will cross Pasig River. And one of our game-changing program is the Inter-Island Linkage Bridge Program. And part of this is the biggest, most expensive single project of DPWH, and this is the 32-kilometer Bataan-Cavite Interlink Bridge that will cross Manila Bay. This will reduce travel time from Bataan to Cavite from 5 hours to just less than an hour once we complete this by passing Metro Manila. And we have already conducted the bidding for 2 contract packages of this very important bridge project. We are not forgetting Mindanao. We are nearly completing Pangil Bay Bridge and will soon open that later part of this year, as well as Gicam Bridge, which was mentioned by the President during the SONA. So we are, aside from the flood control program that I have mentioned, we are also implementing other flood control programs across the country to address climate change. We in the Department of Public Works and Highways, our objective is to reduce transport and logistic costs, to bring down the prices of goods and commodities, and increase protection from calamities and disasters, especially in the light of climate change. Our goal is to drive nationwide economic development through infrastructure to enhance the growth and boost productivity, improving the life and quality of life of every Filipino, in line with the vision of the President for Bagong Pilipinas, his leadership to enhance the economic development of the country. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Undersecretary Cabral. A round of applause. Thank you. And finally, the Energy Regulatory Commission Chairperson and Chief Executive Officer, Mona Lisa de Malanta.
Thank you, Daphne. Magandang hapon po ulit sa lahat. Maybe I will just close this on 2 points. First, maybe one bright spot on this very gloomy and rainy day is that the EPIRA is working. The EPIRA goal is to encourage competition in supply sector, and we have seen over the last few years, particularly in the growth of the retail space. It has been a low-profile success, but it is a success nonetheless. That large consumers in our country today can now contract directly with their own choice of suppliers, and this has led not only to the consumers exercising their power of choice, but really tangible benefits at lower electricity rates. While who are still among households paying for the supply that's contracted by our distribution utilities, averaging here in Metro Manila maybe at 10 to 12 pesos depending on the month. Contestable customers, our large customers, have been paying just a little above 5 pesos. That's the average for 2023, and that's a steady number. It doesn't fluctuate. That's a steady number that they have contracted, and this is because they are now exercising their ability to choose their own suppliers, negotiate for a price that they are willing to take. And over the next 4 years, we see that this growth in the space of contestable customers will really be one of the game changers. It won't be the only one, but it will be one of the key game changers that will move us closer to affordable power rates. Last year, based on our numbers, the savings of our contestable customers have actually led to 46 billion pesos in electricity savings. That's huge, considering that only 50% of our target customer base have migrated to the contestable space. But this leads me to the second point, that while EPIRA is working, there is much to be improved in the law. And we thank the President in his support for EPIRA reforms and EPIRA amendments. Secretary Lotilia mentioned this earlier, that one of the proposals that we have made at the Energy Regulatory Commission is really to reform the agency, introduce more measures, more mandate, more fit-for-purpose organization. This is an organization that was formed in 2001. That has not been, during that time, there is no Renewable Energy Act yet. So from just around 35 or a little less than 40 players in the space, now we have close to 300 generation companies operating in our wholesale electricity spot market. But the Energy Regulatory Commission has not really grown at the pace that the industry has grown. And we look forward to the support also of Congress so that we can have an energy regulator that will really serve the needs and requirements of a very dynamic and evolving energy sector. So lahat pong ito, inaasahan natin. Kanina nagbanggit ang ating mga sekretary ng accountability, and we will match that with accountability also as public servants in the Energy Regulatory Commission, and I'm sure shared also by the other agencies that have shared the updates this afternoon. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Energy Regulatory Commission Chairperson Mona Lisa de Malanta. Thank you to all our panelists today. Thank you for sharing all your achievements and the advancements in your departments and your agencies, and also for sharing some of the challenges and the role that we, the public, can play in contributing. Dahil sabi nga ni Presidente Marcos, no, ito na ay bagong Pilipinas. All of these things in infrastructure, connectivity, and energy ay para sa lahat ng mga Pilipino. So thank you so much. On that note, we are going to be taking a quick break again, and we will be back later at 3 o'clock in the afternoon for our last session. I am Daphne Osenia Paez, and this has been the 2024 Post-SONA Discussions.